Hugh, thank you for joining me today. I have to admit to following the Mackay report for many years, so I'm absolutely thrilled to have you join me today and talk a little bit about some of the issues facing us after the upheaval 2020. I think it's fair to say we start 2021 with possibly more questions than we had answers. And as you say in your book, The Kindness Revolution, we're being confronted with questions like what really matters to me? Am I living the kind of life that I want? What sort of society do I want us to become? And this summit, our theme, The Future We Choose, we thought it was very apt to have this conversation with you. What do you think 2020, what kind of impact do you think 2020 has had on us, and what do you see today?
Thanks, first of all, for inviting me, Sarah. I'm delighted to be part of this event, and I'm sorry I can't be in person. But 2020 is one of those brilliant, wonderful moments in our history that feels neither brilliant nor wonderful when it's happening. And the same goes for in a person's individual, private life. When individuals or societies have to face a crisis, of course it's no fun while it's happening. In Australia, it was the bushfires ravaging us more than ever in anyone's living memory, followed immediately by the pandemic. A massive disruption to our personal lives, our working lives, our social lives, etc. But this is characteristic of humans, that when we have these major disruptions, personally or societally, they're no fun, but almost always we look back and say, we learned a lot from that, didn't we? I've spoken over the years to many people who lived through the Great Depression of the early 1930s. A terrible time, a period of prolonged high unemployment, almost no social security support. And I spoke to many people from that generation who said later, it was the making of us, it sharpened. And in what way is it the making of us? Well, when we have a major disruption, when we're no longer just chugging along with everything happening in the way we expect it to happen, we have to ask ourselves questions. We're forced to think, now, given that everything's in a state of upheaval, what really does matter to me? What do I really believe in? What values do I really embrace? What are my priorities? Now that I've got time to reflect, and now that in the case of the pandemic, and particularly during lockdowns, we had to live more simply, and that forced us to think about living more simply. So the real issue for us now is, as we move through 2021, and the worst of this for Australia and New Zealand, the worst of this seems to be behind us, though we should never take that for granted.
I might hold you to that.
But here's the challenge. Are we going to take the lessons we learned from these extraordinary circumstances and apply them more widely? Are we going to allow ourselves to be quite fundamentally changed by this disruptive experience? In other words, are we going to do what humans in history have often been wonderful at doing, which is taking a crisis, taking a catastrophe, and turning it into a revolution, turning it into a change process so that they start to think of a different kind of future?
And I think that would be certainly making the crisis into something that is actually quite powerful. I think the idea that we would snap back is actually not something that anyone wants us to do.
Snapback is precisely the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that people are talking about the new normal with heavy emphasis on new. The new normal, when people are talking about the new normal, their aspiration is, yes, we want to return to something that will feel like normal life, but in a new way, in the light of these lessons that we've been forced to learn under the influence of the double whammy of the fires and the pandemic. Notice that in a time of disruption like this, it happens when there are floods, it happens when there are storms, etc. It does bring out the best in us. We always know how to be good neighbours when there's a crisis. We always know that kindness respect, inclusiveness, compassion are our default position when people around us are doing it tough. We don't ask questions. We don't say, yes, well, the person at the end of the street is in danger of social isolation. She might be feeling a bit lonely. Will I do anything about this or not? We just do it. We just go and knock on the door. There is such a thing as the cooperative centre in the brain. In other words, we are hardwired for cooperation. If we're hardwired for cooperation, that means we're hardwired for social harmony. That means we're hardwired for kindness.
I just wondered, what's the role of business in kindness, or is there a role for business?
There absolutely is a role for business in kindness, in compassion, in showing respect towards each other. And that's because, and we can start with a personal analogy and then multiply it up to business. In the case of individuals, we're going through a period in Western society at the moment where we're all obsessed with this idea of identity, whether it's gender identity or ethnicity or religious identity and so on, all of which is interesting and important to the individual, but has almost no significance compared with the deeper truth about us that we share a common humanity, that we all exist in a kind of shimmering, vibrating web of interconnectedness and interdependence. The virus knows that. The virus doesn't only pick on Buddhists or on NAB customers. The virus picks on humans. And that's who we are. We are indivisibly one species. So everything we do has an impact on that vibrating web. Now multiply that up to the corporate level. Every corporation, corporations like to talk about brand character, brand personality, as though the corporation wants to be seen as having a personality, as being like a person. We talk about good corporate citizenship, as though the corporation could be regarded as a citizen. Absolutely correct. That's exactly what a corporation is. It too is part of this shimmering, vibrating web of interconnectedness and interdependence. So every act that a corporation performs, whether in relation to its suppliers, or its employees, or its customers, or its shareholders, is helping to determine the kind of society we are going to become. In the same way as me smiling and waving to someone in the street is a step towards a better society. Every act of corporate virtue, every act of corporate goodness, kindness, respect for the customer, respect for the broader society and so on, every step taken by a corporation that way is doing what we hope every corporation is committed to, like every individual. As long as we're here, let's contribute to making the world a better place.
And finally, Hugh, what are your hopes for society? What is the future that you choose?
Well, I'm a dreamer, and I think most of us are dreamers. I dream of a kinder society, don't we all? I mean, if I said to you, do you dream of a society that's kinder, more mutually respectful, more compassionate, more tolerant, more inclusive? Would you dare say, no, I don't dream of that kind of society. I think it should be more dog eat dog. I think we need a bit more violence and a bit more unkindness, a bit more hate. Of course not.
Yes.
We all dream of that kind of society. So what my great hope is that when we think about this, when we introspect about society, and of course we're talking about the corporate context, but let's remember when we say corporate, we're talking about people, and they're individuals. They are making personal human decisions that affect not just the bottom line, but the humans that contribute through their work to the bottom line. So when we dream of the kind of society we want, it seems my great hope is that we will commit ourselves right now to starting to a radical kindness project in which we say that's the sort of society I dream of, but I'd better not wait for the government to wave a magic wand or do something. This is going to start with me, it's going to start with my family, it's going to start with our business, it's going to start with my neighbourhood, where we must begin today to live as if it is that kind of society. And if enough of us start living as if it's that kind of society, that's the kind of society it will become. Revolutions never start at the top.
So it starts with us?
It starts with us.
Thank you so much for your time today, Hugh.
Great pleasure.
Greatly
Thank you,
appreciate
Sarah.
it.